Hi, and welcome to another episode of How to Unpicky Your Picky Eater. I'm your host, Christine, and I'm really excited to talk to you today about different ways that we can try to help kids learn, explore, and eventually eat new foods. Because you've probably tried a lot of the basics already, like sticker tarts, hiding veggies in foods. You've maybe begged or bribed or prayed that your child would just take a bite finally. And still, it's not working, right? And I think a lot of the advice that we hear on the internet is very surface level. So, you've probably heard make food fun. There's you little cookie cutters, you can cut them into shapes, put your spinach in smoothies, but none of these tactics are really getting to the root of what's going on. But today I'm going to share 7 surprising strategies, hopefully they are surprising to you, that actually help kids to expand the types of foods that they're eating. And they're not Pinterest hacks. They're based on what really works in our program. And when you understand how kids think and how their bodies respond and how to take off the pressure, we can really make some progress. So, first off, why does a lot of advice fall short? Right? Some of the most common advice we hear are things like cutting things into like fun shapes, right? So this isn't actually a bad strategy in and of itself, right? It might get your child to look at the food or be excited or giggle, but novelty is not necessarily going to move them if they're in a fear-based or stuck mindset, right? The food underneath that shape has not changed at all. They still know it's a food, just in a different shape. If they're already rejecting things like cucumbers, making them a star-shaped cucumber probably is not going to magically make them appealing. At best, you might buy yourself a moment of curiosity, right? But, you know, if they're fearful and stuck, they're not going to be interested because you change the shape, which is why it's really important to figure out what level your child is at. So if you haven't already, take our quiz at thepickyeaterstest.com to find out your child's level. Also, a lot of parents try this strategy of bribing with dessert. This is a classic. Eat 3 bites of broccoli, then you can get your ice cream. And on the surface, it really feels like it works. So your kids might actually not just take a bite, but choke down and eat that broccoli. And you're like, whew, I did it. I got them to do it. But what are we really teaching here? We're teaching that food becomes like a currency. So what do I mean by that? Broccoli becomes the chore or the work that has to happen before they get their reward, the ice cream or the prize. So over time, this generally does not build acceptance of new foods. It kind of deepens the divide, and veggies become that punishment and sweets become the reward, which is really not our goal. It's kind of like the opposite of our goal, where we want them to really like the veggies and push the sweets aside. And the same sort of goes for the sneaking in the veggies thing, right? The spinach and the brownie trick, cauliflower and the mac and cheese. And we do use some of these strategies. I have a whole book about how to make food more nutrient dense, but sneaking in could be a double-edged sword. And here's why. If you have a fearful eater, a child who panics when they notice little tiny specks, hiding that food, is going to backfire. Because the second they find out or realize that there is something different about this food, the story in their brain becomes, I can't trust what I'm being given. And when the trust is broken, progress can really stall. So that's why sneaking in can be like 1 step forward, 2 steps back, right? But now if you flip this around, if you have a curious eater, a child who already eats a range of safe foods and they might need some more nutrition because they're still working on expanding their variety, sneaking in isn't really sneaking at all. It's really an upgrade, right? Adding chia seeds to pancakes or putting extra veggies into sauce or making a smoothie more nutrient dense is a great way to boost what's already working because they're already okay with some simple swaps. So really, it's just a different recipe that we're doing, right? So for a kid that eats tomato sauce from any restaurant or any jar, as long as it's red, it doesn't really matter if you add in a little bit more vegetables or not, because it's a different recipe. It's still red sauce, right? So hopefully you understand what I'm trying to say here. And that's why it's so important to know which level your child is at. So again, I'll plug my quiz so you get that baseline information of where your child is at and which strategies would be appropriate for that level, right? Because trying to implement the wrong strategies on the wrong type of child or the wrong level that they're at could really backfire. And we've seen that happen a lot. So let's dive into the actual strategies. So number one is micro steps, not leaps. Instead of aiming for broccoli today and Brussels sprouts tomorrow, think micro baby steps. If your child only eats plain pasta, add like one shred of cheese or a single sprinkle of garlic powder, right? And celebrate if they're able to accept that change and celebrate that step. So your nervous system adapts best in small, safe increments, and a fearful eater needs to be successful at all different stages. So inside of our program, I would show you how to build tolerance step by step, so you're not guessing what the next step should be. Sometimes that might be adding in something like that shred of cheese. Sometimes it might be changing the shape of something. It really does just depend on your child. But again, think small, teeny weeny changes and small, teeny weeny baby steps, right? So progress is not going to be broccoli and Brussels sprouts overnight. It's plain pasta to plain pasta of a different shape, or plain pasta to one shred of a different type of cheese, right? So number two, sensory play before bites. Sometimes the hands are the gateway to the mouth, right? So let your child play a little bit with yogurt, make silly faces with fruit slices, squish peas between their fingers, but outside of meal times. And this could help because it could reduce the fear by engaging their senses without the pressure to eat. So that's why it's outside of mealtime. Touching, smelling, hearing, all of that is progress before a bite ever even is going to happen. So we give like sensory play activities that are more specific to the type of sensory profile your child has, right? Some kids are really oversensitive with tactile or visual sensory systems, or maybe they're really understimulated and they need a lot more input. So what that sensory play or engagement could look like is really different from child to child. So if they can touch it, they are going to be closer to tasting it. So that's why a lot of people talk about food play. All right, let's dive into number three, use safe food pairings. So always offer new food next to something safe. For example, carrot sticks next to their crackers that they eat every day, or a new dip alongside the chicken nuggets that are their favorite. So there's no pressure to mix, but keep them side by side. So safe food acts like their anchor. It lowers anxiety, it builds confidence that the plate won't be scary, and that there's actually something worth coming to the table for. Right now, you might have heard of food chaining. It's like, I'd say, a concept that's all over the internet, but I have a pretty specific types of things that I look at on the internet. So maybe you haven't heard of it. But the idea is that you take one food that your child is already eating and you slowly make changes that link to a new food. For example, chicken nuggets to homemade nuggets to grilled chicken. And it sounds simple, but here's the catch. The path is not the same for every child. What works for one picky eater might completely overwhelm another. And why? Because every child's profile is different. Some kids are sensitive to texture, others to smell, others to temperature or sound. So that's why when we create your roadmap, we don't just say follow this chain. We map progress through the 8 sensory systems in a step-by-step way that'll help them to hopefully feel safe. So yes, pair new foods with safe ones, but don't expect the chain to look like your neighbor's or the one that you saw online, because your child's unique ladder is going to be, again, unique to them. All right, number 4, change the environment. If meals are stressful, change the setting. Try dimming the lights, playing soft music, maybe taking dinner outside on a blanket. This could really help because some kids associate the place that they are at with stress. A fresh environment resets the brain and makes trying foods a little less intimidating. Now, changing the environment in and of itself is not going to get a fearful eater to suddenly eat their food, but it might open them up a little bit or shake up their routine, right? So we talk about these as being cues to meal times, like lighting, sound, environment, people. And those things can either support the nervous system and help them regulate or hinder, right? So in my book, Mealtime Mindset, I have a whole chapter on this mealtime cues, things like that we just talked about, like the lighting, the sounds, the pace of the meal. And these small shifts are going to help regulate their system. So if you've only been focusing on the plate, it might be a good idea to zoom out because sometimes the problem isn't always just the food, it's also the environment. Okay, strategy number 5, building their food identity. So instead of calling your child picky, call them a learner, right? We're saying things like, you're someone who is discovering or learning about new foods. So kids live up to the labels that we give them. So if they start to hear themselves being called picky eaters, they're going to say that they are a picky eater, right? We don't want them to stay stuck. We always want to be in a growth mindset. So identify them as learners so they can start to see food as a skill or something that they're learning about, right? So we want to kind of rewire their brain, and that's what we do in our program, right? We rewire their brain and yours as well, because you have to also see them as somebody who is learning versus somebody who's stuck or fearful about food, right? So the label tricky traps kids, the label learner sort of frees them. Okay, so number 6, we want to involve them in food preparation. So allow them to sprinkle cheese in, stir in the sauce, or set food on the plate. It does not have to be perfect. Messy is still progress. This helps because kids are really naturally very curious, right? Even about foods, even if they are on the fearful side, there is that innate, sorry, you might hear a little baby. I had to, somebody woke up from their nap. So we're improvising here with baby wearing. Okay, so sorry, continuing on. So when they're helping in the kitchen, it's going to come with a sense of ownership. And it should lower their resistance to touching that food, trying that food, etc. Now, we do have a lot of activities that you can do with kids in the kitchen, but the simplest one is just while you're prepping and making food to just involve them in some small way. They don't have to be there for the entire food prep. I know that could be really hard and kind of exhausting on your part when you're already doing a lot to prep food. But it is really, really helpful. So if you can find a way to involve them in a small task and then let them go on and continue what they're doing, that would be really, really helpful. All right. Now, strategy number 7, teach the why. Kids love to know how things work. Instead of just saying like, eat your chicken or it's good for you, say protein helps your muscles to grow, to recover after you play soccer, right? Or carbs can give your brain fuel to focus in class, or to play your video games better, right? So when kids understand what food does to their body, they see eating as empowerment versus pressure, right? So we have tools that we use, but the biggest tools are the words that we're going to be saying to them as their parent or caregiver, right? We also have great things like our food coloring log, which has just about every fruit or vegetable. And we talk about how they have superpowers. So on each page with whatever fruit or vegetable, it says some kind of superpower that food helps, how it helps your body, right? So carrots might give you like night vision power because it helps you to see in the dark a little bit. Blueberries, whatever the food is, there's peppers and all sorts of vegetables of all different colors. And they could learn a lot by knowing that food is more than just a color or a flavor. What does it do for their body? So teaching why doesn't have to feel like a nutrition lecture. It can be fun and playful. And hopefully it will build their confidence and interest in the food a little bit. So these 7 strategies work because they're really rooted in trust and curiosity and in making meaningful progress, and really not in putting pressure on them. Now, if you want a plan that will tell you which strategy to use and when and what's next, that's exactly what we do in our program, right? So if you are unfamiliar with our work, if you haven't taken our quiz to see what level your child is on with food, take the quiz at thepickeaterstest.com. This will give you the information about what level your child is at, and then you'll get some emails with tailored next steps and suggestions of things you can start and use. And I give you a tool that you can use right away. So it's really tailored to your child's needs at that point. Now, if you have had this problem that's ongoing, you already know that they are super fearful, you can dive right in to getting our roadmap, which is where we basically assess and get a really clear picture of what is going on, what are the areas to work on, what steps are we going to take next, what are we going to avoid. There's a lot here to uncover. When it comes to picky eating, it's really not just picky eating. It's about their whole body and how all the systems are working together or really not working together, right? So let's just do a quick recap. Here's what you need to know from this episode. A lot of those surface level hacks, they don't work because they're not really building trust or skill, right? But real progress is going to come in small steps with sensory play, safe pairings, changing the environment, and changing the way you talk and involve kids with food. Language matters. We're not calling our kids picky. We're calling them learners. We're calling them explorers, right? And we want to involve them in food as much as possible outside of the table. So involving them in cooking and teaching them some of the whys behind the food. All right, so hopefully this will help you to shift meal times a little bit in your favor and get kids interested, get them curious about foods. And, that is the start of the journey to them eating. So the strategies I'm giving you today, they're not strategies that's going to get you that quick win of their, oh my gosh, it's like I tried this and then he ate that broccoli at dinner. That's probably not going to happen. But what is going to happen is we're setting the stage for that safety so that that can be a reality in the not so distant future versus continuing to do what's not working and pushing them further from that end goal, right? So these little baby steps that I've given you today, these strategies are going to help get your child to a place where they're actually able to, and very often what happens is kids on their own will pick up the food and eat it without being asked. And that's that intrinsic internal motivation that we talk about, that we want kids to naturally come to that place where they're interested in food and they want to taste it. And that does happen when there is that trust, that connection, when they're feeling that their bodies are safe. When we've built in all these little skills and we've gotten them to a place where they know that the food is not going to hurt them and they can be successful, and that they can overcome a lot of their challenges. But it takes some time, it takes trust, and it takes these baby micro steps. So hopefully this episode helped you out. And if you feel like you need more support, hopefully I will see you and greet you, and I can't wait to work with you as part of our course in Unlocking Mealtimes. We will see you again next week for another episode.
Thank you for listening to How to Unpicky Your Picky Eater. To learn more about achieving your child's feeding goals, check out Christine's website at foodologyfeeding.com. And be sure to tune in next time to How to Unpicky Your Picky Eater.